Hello and welcome back to another episode of Blu-ray Impressions. I wanted to talk about another new Eureka release, the Master Cinema Spy number 284. We're getting closer and closer to that big 300. I'm really intrigued to see if they got anything planned for that one. This is The Cat and the Canary. We previously talked about this in an update video, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about how great this release is and how kind of special it is in kind of film history's sake. At least for me personally, I think. Like, just looking at the wider scope of where this sits in both horror cinema and silent cinema history is really interesting and cool. I was looking forward to this one. I'd seen a previous Paul Laney film that's also in the MOC collection, which is The Last Warning, I think, which has a kind of similar feeling to it, only the kind of characters gather together and the murder mystery plot is kind of takes place at a theater, whereas this is kind of the prototypical old dark house. And so it follows a group of family members who, after 20 years of the death of the kind of patriarch of the family, a very wealthy man, they go to the house and they're going to find out who's in the will and who's going to receive the estate and the money and all that kind of stuff. And then, as you would expect, people start getting knocked off, and it's, you can almost look at it and say, wow, it's the first old dark house movie, but even then it isn't. And there's always probably something that happened before that. And I always hasten to ever say, well, this is the first of the da 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 da, because invariably you go back to like the 1890s and someone else did it, or Méliès probably did all of it first. So there's all that kind of stuff to consider when you maybe make a lofty statement, but it is really and that's maybe I forget. I did note it down because I plan to do a deep dive, and I keep saying this, and I apologize for anyone who might be impatient with that. But I've done a fair bit of work already on my in-depth review of this, but I want to talk about it while it's more current. This just came out a few weeks ago. I one of the extras, it may have been one of the guys in the commentary, in one of the two great commentaries on the disc. Someone said that the special effects in this film, some of the double multiple exposure effects, were kind of stuff that people had never really seen before, and that I just thought, well, I call bullshit on that, because you go back to you can really go back to the early 1900s, and again, all roads kind of lead back to Georges Méliès and the stuff that he was doing with camera tricks and things like that. But I've seen fairly sophisticated double exposure, multiple exposure effects. We have kind of like a ghost-like image overlaid on top of the base image, so to speak, where a character can look like a ghost, in effect. I've seen that done to great effect and in multiple impressive ways in like early 1920s films. But I understand how easy it can be to kind of look at something that's, this is almost 100 years old, and you can go, holy this is, fairly revolutionary for its time. And it's just crazy in general how young the medium of film still is. I've talked about this before as well recently, actually, in some video or another, where, it's a baby, it's like a child, doesn't know what to do. It's compared to music or art, paintings, writing, cinema is still just a little speck in the grand scheme of things, but it's so fascinating to be able to go back and look at something, a century ago. And for me personally, I'm no silent film expert, but I would say compared to maybe your average film watcher, I've seen quite a lot of them. And so I can fairly safely say that what Paul Laney's doing in this film with the camera is pretty damn ahead of its time. There's like moving POV shots that feel at least handheld. I don't know if they were handheld, but they have the feeling of handheld. There's a lot of moving camera stuff, which you just don't get a lot of in silent films. I mean, it was done again, sure. And I have seen recently some films in the late 1920s, and they talk about that in the commentaries about how, if this film had been made a couple of years later, and it really was made around the time that sound was first exploding onto the screens, even though it was a bit of a tricky transition from silent cinema to the sound era, to the talkies. But if this was made a couple of years afterwards, and it was a talkie, and there was sound, the cameras would have been different, and there would have been sound equipment, and so that locks them down a bit more, and so there wouldn't have been the fluidity of that camera stuff that you get in this film, which I just thought really for its time, and having watched a lot of films in the 1920s, it stood out to me how much the camera was moving. And so I think from that technical perspective, this is an important film. But then it's the fact that this is like a universal horror film, right? A couple of years before Dracula and Frankenstein. I think the production designer on this was the same one as Dracula. And it feels like the genesis point of one of the great cycles of movie history, which was the universal horror cycle. You know, those great monster movies that rose beyond what we look at now as kind of almost not a subgenre. Well, I'm not saying I view it as a subgenre, but horror has always been maligned, I think, by critics, I think, by the critical masses of the film world. And you'll see amazing horror films with fantastic performances that get absolutely nothing when it comes to awards season, which is a whole other topic, of course. But I'm just saying that, you know, horror films in general, generally speaking, you're talking about stuff that's there to kind of thrill you, to scare you. It's there to serve a very functional purpose, rather than being a great film or like an interesting character study, but it's there as a kind of an entertainment point. But you look at those early Universal monster movies, and there's genuine great like pathos going in. Pathos? But there's weight to them, and they're great stories, and they have great performances in them too. And this is it's an early Universal horror movie, and they talk in the extras about how like Dracula and Frankenstein was when like real monsters within the story started to exist, whereas the monster in The Cat and the Canary, I don't think I even said the title of the film yet, have I? It's been, you know, almost 10 minutes. The Cat and the Canary, Paul Laney, 1927, I apologize. In The Cat and the Canary, there is a monster, but it's not your prototypical universal, you know, monster. It's a bit different than that. And so you have what was originally a stage play, playing out in a way that doesn't feel like, and you still get that to this day. You get movies that are based on plays, and it's like, oh, this feels like a play movie, you know. So I'm trying to think of a recent example, Fences, I think, with Denzel Washington, where it all takes place in that house in the garden, and it feels like this was probably on stage at some point, for someone who didn't know about the original play. And you get films where it's just like it plays out. You can kind of feel how it would have gone on the stage. Whereas with this one, I guess you can feel that too because it's one location. But I just feel like the way the camera's moving, and the expansive sets, and the different various rooms and everything, and the little kind of tunnel ways and things, it feels very cinematic, and it doesn't feel like it's a rigid adaptation of a stage play. And I love the use of the intertitles, like to inject personality and tone into the dialogue. That's really interesting. And, you know, I feel like I haven't seen a whole lot of that in the 1920s. There's some of it, to be sure, but to this degree, where it really, you know, you get these kinds of like distorted letters that are shivering to invoke, you know, fear in a character or whatever. I just think there's some really cool stuff being done in this film, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great film, but I just I think it's really intriguing to see stuff, and how lucky we are that we get to see some of this stuff. There's a featurette on this talking about the genesis of the play, The Cat and the Canary story, and the various adaptations that it had to film, including this one and beyond. And, you know, there's a couple of different things that are mentioned in the commentaries where they're films that are now lost. But this one, thankfully, remains. And so it's great that we get to see them in these great restorations. I think this one, I don't know if it's a 4K digital restoration of the original negatives. So this thing just looks fantastic, and just some of the effects, you know, are so cool, and they really make the film stand out, because I've seen silent films with the kind of visual effects that you see, or special effects that you see in silent films, but it uses it in a way that completely services the entire story and the feel and the mood of the film. Because I've seen other silent films with, you know, multiple exposure effects, and it just feels there as a gimmick, whereas this feels more in line with the overall spooky feeling that this film has from the opening shot. which is the hand wiping away the dust that reveals the title. We even have like the one of the first examples of the Universal like logo, that's the sphere, the globe of the Earth, where you can pinpoint all the flat earthers around the globe and where they live. So that's cool. So you get that, just all these little things I really enjoyed about this film, and there's the performances. But I will go deep into this film, show you some clips, and talk about the extras and stuff, and get into the nitty gritty of the booklet and everything. But I recommend this one. I try not to, as I'm reviewing a film or a Blu-ray that I've been sent to review, I try not to say, I recommend this, or you should go buy this, because I think that's a bit disingenuous. But I would kind of recommend this one if you're a horror fan, if you're a silent film fan, it's a no-brainer. And I love this new artwork I'll put the slipcover on because you get the matte finish and no glaring reflection from the lights. This one was done by Graham Humphreys. I really like his stuff. But yeah, we've got Laura LaPlante there in the front. She's such a great screen presence. I think I really enjoy her in the film. The whole cast is pretty damn good, actually. And I think this is Mamie Pleasant. That's the character's name. I forget the actress's name off the top of my head, but she's really great as kind of the woman who's oh god, she just has such a feel to her. I don't know, there's a spookiness to her, and her performance is fantastic, and she's the maid of the house who stayed there alone for 20 years. I just love the atmosphere of the thing, and I think that this is another knockout release from Eureka. Lots of great extras, 2 commentaries on the film, a whole bunch of new video interviews with critics talking about the various themes of the film, the backstory. There's a really great feature on there that has like a whole host of like voiceover parts. So you'll get like the quotes from Paul Laney, the director, performed by someone doing the voice, and so you have lots of. I thought it was kind of interesting how they did that, and I want to talk about that more in a future video. But otherwise, The Cat and the Canary, it's another winner for me in terms of the MOC collection, and I'm really glad to see another silent film enter the collection too. We could always stand to get more, I think, because we're kind of swinging like a pendulum at this point between a lot of East Asian releases and the odd kind of silent film. Pandora's Box was the last one, which was another amazing release, actually. That was just incredible. Probably one of my favorite releases in a long time. And this one feels similar to that, actually, in terms of the quality of the extras and everything. And but yeah, Cat and the Canary. I'm looking forward to really diving into it deep. As I said, I got all the clips set for that one. I've got 3 pages of notes, I think. So I have more to say about this, but this was just kind of a general impressions, and just to get a video out in a more timely fashion to talk about this release and give it a bit more of a featured push, because I think it deserves it, and I would highly recommend it. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So Cat and the Canary, if you've seen it, let me know your thoughts. If you've got the release, what you think of it, and what silent films you'd like to see released by MOC or Eureka in the MOC collection moving forward, because I hope we get more soon, because it's just, I eat this stuff up. I love silent films so much. It's such a huge passion of mine, and it is always just like a warm, comforting feeling to get back to a silent film, because I just love them so much. I don't know why. There's just a feeling of the history of it that really excites me and engages me in a way that other films just don't. And not that it's the most engaging form of film for me, but I can always count on a silent film to engage me in something, whereas other forms of film I can't say the same for. So, but this one was more than just a film that engaged me. It was in its own way as well a great film, and just a fascinating snapshot into a changing industry, but how much Paul Laney was pushing the form of a silent film with those intertitles, with the camera movements, and really exciting stuff to see, and a great story wrapped up in it too, and a nice whodunit to boot. So Cat and the Canary gets a thumbs up from me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.